I have a question. When it comes to companies that focus on children's entertainment and animation, things that are predominantly geared towards a younger audience, why do they still get such a kick out of scaring the crap out of us?
And they're certainly not showing any signs that they are slowing!
A lot of children's movies have so many scary images in a variety of forms. Disney especially. The transformation scene from Pinocchio is horrifying enough.
Mama!
And one of my earliest childhood memories was actually running screaming out of a movie theater because the witch was popping on screen in Snow White. I remember this because some of my relatives still like to bring this up from time to time. They think it's hysterical. But little horror moments in children's movies can take on so many different forms, to the point it can still surprise you sometimes. And I think that's why a couple of years ago, Coraline got so much publicity.
No! Where are you? You selfish brat!
Because it was not only a well-crafted story with great visuals, it was legitimately eerie in some instances, and it touched on a lot of dark subject matter. And if you think Coraline was dark, you ain't seen nothing yet. An 11-year-old kid named Norman has visions where he sees dead people all around him. I know, it's not the most original thing on the planet, but it's got a good twist on it. He lives in a town that's famous for its witch-related past, and he's tasked with making sure that the witch doesn't rise from her grave and attack the town. He tries to do so, but he fails, and in response, the dead start walking through the town. So it's up to Norman and his friends to put the witch back to sleep and stop the zombies before it's too late. Now, if you haven't seen anything from Leica Entertainment and you have even the faintest interest in animation, you are really missing out. Every single frame from them has been breathtaking. Coraline is so dark and twisted while still being a joy to sit through. Kubo and the Two Strings is probably my favorite animated film. It's got the best stop motion and some of the most creative design structures I've ever seen in my life. And Box Trolls, I will get to eventually. I've heard good things. But as a horror nut, I found such a strong connection with Paranorman, because so much of this film is an homage to old 70s and 80s horror classics. It's got appreciation for everything from Argento Italian art horror to Hitchcockian thrillers, even John Carpenter in some instances.
Ah! Wanna play some hockey?
Although a crux of the movie is Norman talking to ghosts, the ghosts themselves don't really play much of a role in the film other than just kind of being an interesting visual. And all of them are pretty fun to watch. They're all somewhat friendly, aside from their otherworldly design, and each of them paint a pretty clear picture on how they died.
How you doing?
Hey, how you doing?
Which is dark. This movie is really, really dark for kids. The zombies are really interesting when they show up. They've all got identifying body and head shapes, mannerisms, and deformities. My favorite is Jawless Pete over here. And the stuff with the witch is fantastic too, only getting better when she reveals her true form.
I don't want to go to sleep, and you can't make me.
Even to this day, even after watching all the behind-the-scenes making-ofs for stuff like Nightmare Before Christmas, Corpse Bride, Coraline, I still have no idea how people have the patience, the time, or the energy to make stop-motion look this good. I don't care how much of it is computers, there is so much effort that goes into moving the characters for just one frame. Not to say that the end result isn't great, because this film is gorgeous. The facial expressions are all amazing, the character designs are all fun, especially the backdrops and the scenery. They're all so vivid and creative. I know that there are people out there who don't like this type of animation, but I don't see how you can hate something like this. It's so beautiful. So even taking out the animation, which you really shouldn't do because, oh my god, it's flawless and pretty and unbelievably captivating. What else is there to this movie? Pretty much everything.
What's happening now?
Well, the zombie is eating her head, Grandma.
That's not very nice.
The characters in this movie are all amazing. They've all got their quirks and personalities, their motivations, and they all work together really well on screen. Amazing voice acting, amazing movement. They all just really work well. Norman is probably the least interesting to talk about, and he's the one who talks to dead people. But you know exactly where the story arc is going to go here. He's made fun of, his powers will come into use, people will appreciate him. That's how all of these stories play out. But even with that in mind, you don't care because everything else that surrounds him is great.
So keep out of my way.
Or what?
Or, I'll punch you in the boobs.
I don't have boobs. These are pectorals. Ow, my boobs!
All the other characters are so much fun to watch, and they're really well cast. Jeff Garlin, Anna Kendrick, Casey Affleck, McLovin, Alex Borstein, and holy crap, John Goodman.
Things you can't quite explain. Strange faces peering through the veil.
But if you've watched the movie already, you probably know who my favorite character is, because he's the single greatest best friend character in any children's movie I've ever seen.
Leave him alone. Don't make me throw this hummus. It's spicy.
Neil is such a fun character to watch. He's weird, but he's never annoying. He's funny, but he's never obnoxious. He's so well written. My entire series of notes when I was watching this is just the word Neil is awesome written like 5 times.
I'm busy.
Are you freeze framing Mom's Aerobics DVD again?
No.
And I guess now's a good time to bring up just how genuinely funny this movie is. It is always contrasted with the dark, dreary backgrounds, and there are very few moments of heartwarming joy to be found, so instead there's just wave after wave of black comedy.
Did you see that?
That was insane.
I know, right? I kicked that like 100 yards!
But it doesn't just rely on the shock of the moment trying to insert humor where it's unnecessary. There's a lot of good character-based humor as well. Probably the best joke in the entire thing is Anna Kendrick's character, who's been fawning over Casey Affleck's for the entire runtime, finally asks him out. And his response is...
That sounds great, Kathy. You know, you're gonna love my boyfriend. He's like a total chick flick nut.
Yeah. This movie had low-key the first openly gay character in an animated film on this level. That's huge. And the fact they did it so nonchalantly and with such class is really a big deal. And yeah, it did lead to some minor protests here and there, and some people complained about it, but this is my review, and I can say screw those people. This is awesome.
Darn it.
But don't let me forget that we're talking about this around Halloween for a reason, because this movie is sincerely messed up. There are corpses falling on little kids, jump scares, the undead detached limbs, pretty much every scene with this little brat. The film doesn't really sugarcoat anything. And probably the biggest, this was meant for kids shock moment, this entire town has based their entire legacy on how happy they are that they killed one suspected witch in the 1700s. The entire town is decked out with shops bearing witch-based puns for names, souvenir shops, and oh my god, that's the sign that welcomes people into the town. Kids movie. Kids movie.
We thought we knew our way in life, but in death, we are lost. Please, help us.
But the humor and the horror elements never really overshadow the story because, you know what? This is all leading to a great story with the characters. You don't ever feel like any of them are gonna die, even though Coraline kind of proved that this company is willing to go that far down the rabbit hole. You get to learn more about the town's history, who the zombies are, and you appreciate why the witch was feared so much and just how much of that was lost in translation. Because the big twist of this movie is, the witch was not a nasty creature who wanted to hurt everyone. It was a kid.
And it is passed on you, according to your grievous crimes, execution!
No!
Do you have anything to say for yourself?
And you know stuff like this has happened in history too. The witch trials were pretty insane. And they were right. She actually was a witch. But still, not cool, guys.
I'll make all of you sorry!
Pretty much all the scenes with the witch in both forms I think are great. I love her tragic backstory and her reactions to the situation as a real character. I love when she goes crazy and you see her face in the clouds and the way she looks when Norman finally approaches her. I think it's just great animation all the way through, especially at the end.
I burnt the book into dust. Now I don't have to listen to that stupid story anymore!
It's weird to see in the scope of pretty much every kid's film that deals with a little bit of a scary situation that the antagonists don't actually intentionally hurt anyone. It's all based on misinformation.
Kill him in the head!
The zombies are more frightened of the living than the other way around. The only on-screen death is by natural causes.
No, not yet. Not yet.
And the witch herself only goes after the town's replicas of the evil, crazy old witch. Except for all those times she tried to kill Norman when he went to go face her at the end, but really that's his own fault for not listening to her.
That story you were telling, how does it end?
I think that's up to you.
And even the ending is pretty unique. The evil in the film is beaten by talking to her and showing compassion. And yeah, it might seem kind of cheesy and not very satisfying to a lot of people, but there is a thin line between the power of love conquering all and just showing non-violent ways to deal with your problems, which this movie did really well. Hell, Kubo did it really well too. God, I love the movies the studio makes.
Just knew something like this was gonna happen tonight.
You did? Wow. 'Cause that zombie bit really threw me.
I could gush about this movie for a long time, but seriously, you should just see it yourself. Yes, there's a few nitpicks I could make here and there, but most of them are related to the tropes that you knew were going to exist in this type of kids movie anyway. The weird kid that nobody understands, the overly obnoxious bullies, the middle of the movie fight that gets resolved anyway and it's just filling time. But even with that in mind, there's so much left to focus on. The brilliant animation, the hilarious and well-defined characters, the well-paced and incredibly satisfying journey they all embark on. This movie is just a joy to watch every time. And it was nominated for Oscars and it helped keep the reputation of the studio going, which is great. But not a lot of people seem to talk about it these days. But I could definitely see it becoming a cult classic in a few years with more and more people getting on board. So if you haven't watched it and you don't have a severe hatred of stop motion animation, you need to see this. That little kid inside of you that kind of likes being scared to death, he's really going to appreciate it.
So, what's happening now?
You know, every year I talk about at least one movie that's really dumb, but I like watching it anyway, and I don't think I've done that yet. Tell you what, next time we'll go over a couple. I feel like doing another hit list.
Who's there?